Hello, this is Mr. Youngblood. If you're watching this video, this is your general shop safety packet. We're going to go through this. If you're watching this, this is because either I wasn't present or you weren't present, and so this is the alternative version, so that you can get this information also. We're going to go step by step through this packet. I'm going to supply opportunities for you to pause the video and to think, and if you're in a small group or even a classroom situation, you can actually discuss some of these safety issues or experiences that you may have had. So make sure you have a packet. If not, you can follow the link and get your copy. And follow along, please. So why are we doing this? If you take any of the shop classes at Wayland Union High School, you will cover this general shop safety packet. Myself and Mr. Harder feel it's valuable that we cover this information and that it makes you think about how safety affects you and your family and really your future. So the first question always is, what is safety? And, and safety is more than hard hats and steel-toe boots. Safety is most definitely an attitude. It is a way of thinking about the what-ifs that may happen or may occur. And some are predictable and some are not predictable. A lot of times we get caught up with an accident just happened and I should have known better, or the statements that are written here is, I just wasn't thinking. I had a feeling it wasn't going to work. I was afraid someone was going to call me chicken. And those are great excuses in cartoons or on YouTube videos. However, in real life, they're nothing more than excuses. You still have the injury, and you still have the consequences that follow that injury. And so we're trying to hope that you will think through some of that, because injuries are lasting. They're permanent, and they most definitely it'll affect your vocation, and it will affect what you're able and capable of doing in the future. The last one on that list there is, I'm invincible, and we get caught up with that a lot. We may not actually put on our cape and say we're invincible, but we act like it a lot. We don't wear our safety belts in the car, or we don't put our safety glasses on, or we put them on top of our head, or we walk into a shop with flip-flops on, and we come with the attitude that it's not going to happen to us. And there's all sorts of unwritten laws out there that basically say that it's going to happen to you because you said it wouldn't. The whole idea of safety being an attitude is that we are constantly trying to minimize any accident from slipping into your life and affecting your mind or your body. And so that's what safety as an attitude means. Have you ever said any of the above things? Have you ever been called a chicken and then did something unsafe? I'm not even going to use the word stupid, but have you ever done anything unsafe and you knew better? Or you went into it with the attitude of, it's not going to happen to me. Pause and think about that, or discuss this for a minute. The next section of our general shop safety packet is safety is understanding consequences. At age 14 to 18, your life has been so small that, lifelong consequences don't seem to register yet inside your mind. And for some of you guys, that's different. You've had life experiences that you definitely have had to deal with consequences directly from your own actions. Whether we're operating a machine in woodworking class, or lifting a vehicle, or building a set, there are always three ways of doing something. And there is, the first way is the absolutely correct way. You followed all the rules. You put up all the safety guards. You kept your finger to blade distances correct. And you did it correctly. And when you do all those parts correctly, you have correct results. The second way is that you did it the wrong way. You either didn't know better, or you went in with that invincible idea that it's not going to happen to me, and wham, that board got thrown, your hand got sucked into a blade, you dropped a vehicle on your body, or even somebody else, because you just had a complete disrespect for the rules. And the third way is that I was just lucky. I have seen people operate the table saw completely incorrectly, and nothing bad happened. I've seen people run red lights and stop signs and not get hit by another vehicle. You've seen these situations. The problem is lucky is not consistent. Lucky doesn't happen every single time. But people start depending on luck. They start depending on the chance that, well, I'm just a lucky person, or it's not going to hurt me. It's going to come, it's going to bite, and it's going to hurt hard. Following, if you turn to the second page, following information was taken from the Bureau for Labor and Statistics and OSHA. And these stats are all from 2015, which is the latest reported dates. In 2015, 2.9 million non-fatal injuries and illnesses were reported by private industry. Now, when I say 2.9 million injuries were reported, think about the other millions of injuries that weren't reported. And these are private employees. These aren't in the public spectrum, so they're not your teachers, your policemen, your social workers, your park service people. These are private industries. So, there's lots of injuries that don't get reported. There's lots of injuries that honestly get hushed by, if a guy has 7 employees, they may not report it. So I'll let that to your imagination of how many millions of injuries go unreported each year. However, most deaths, I would think, are reported on the workplace. And so in 2015, 4,836 workers were killed on the job. And these stats are for the United States, of course. But that's kind of mind-numbing to think that many people died in the workplace. And I shouldn't even say died, they were killed. They were injured. And that could happen from machine entanglement to crushing, to falling downstairs. Probably this is not health concerns. This is not someone having a heart attack or a stroke, or just going out on old age. If we break down those numbers, you follow along in your text here. The closest to home number is 13 deaths per day. and we would like to think that all 13 of those deaths were avoidable. Now, once again, you know, a true accident is unavoidable, but if you follow it back far enough, we find spots where it could have been avoidable. We put down in your packet the Construction's Fatal Four. And I put down construction because, you know, some of you guys are in auto class, some of you guys are in set design or woods or even power tech. But I think that everybody watching this video, all my students in the seats, they have somebody that construction's relatable. You know somebody in the construction field. Mr. Hart and myself always tell students that if you know how to run a tape measure and use a miter saw, you could probably get a job on a construction site. Construction is an area where there's a lot of entry-level jobs. But out of all the deaths that happen on the construction field, 38.8% were from falls. These are falling off roofs, these are falling off ladders, these are falling off scaffolding. These are probably not falling just because you trip over a cord. These are big falls. And some of them might have been 1 story, and some of them might have been 40 stories. And some of them might have been a fall onto a lower story. And so falls are big. You've probably been to Menards and you see the guys wearing the harnesses, and they're supposed to be harnessed out. How many guys have ever been on the roof and not worn a harness? You know, harnesses are required when you go on a roof. Number 2 is struck by an object, you know, and that's at 9.6%. And you say, well, I really struck by an object? How many of you guys have ever tried to carry a chair through your house and you end up hitting the wall? Or you try carrying even an 8-foot ladder through your house by yourself and you hit the wall. It wouldn't take much for somebody to not be aware of how big their object is and strike you with it, or if they're operating a forklift and strike you with it. Or a machine just is faulty and something flies. 8.6% of deaths happen by electrocution. And we're not talking like a household outlet. We're usually talking a lot more electricity. Your industrial settings, or your settings that someone should have known better to shut off the electricity before they entered into a flooded facility, or the wiring in the facility hasn't been up to date and there was a short that they couldn't predict. And the last one, boy, that number 4 there, 7.2% is caught in between. That's one that makes me really nervous. Getting squeezed to death. And yet we found ourselves working in grandpa's barn or uncle's garage, and we will squeeze ourselves into some kind of weird spot to get that part or to work on that area, and we really don't have a good exit. Or we try to squeeze our body through a certain area, and that's not safe. Because gravity exists, and regardless of what you think, gravity is going to happen on this earth. So things will go down, and things come together. Thoughtful question here. Has anyone in your family ever been injured on the workplace? I'm going to give you a moment to kind of pause this video, to think about that, to write down anyone that has been injured or any situation, or to share amongst your class right now. Common shop hazards. Now, regardless of what shop you're actually in or what classroom you're involved in, the shop hazards are there. And so they may differ whether you're in a gas shop, an engine shop, or a woodworking shop. So first shop hazard is fire. Fire is destructive. There are very few fireproof buildings per se. A fire needs three things for it to burn. The three things are: it needs a fuel. All fires need a fuel. If there's nothing to burn, they can't burn. The second thing is that it needs oxygen. Oxygen by itself doesn't burn, but it will support a fire. It will make a fire much hotter. And the third thing that a fire needs is it needs a spark. It needs some form of ignition. Extreme heat will start a fire, but it takes quite a bit of heat to ignite most fuels. I know that wood requires a heat of about 1,000 degrees for it to actually ignite. So if you turn the page, we are on the third page now. What are some of the flammable materials in your shop? And depending on your current location, you may just be able to look around the room, and whether you're in the CAD lab or the wood shop lab or the auto shop or even at home, but what are some of the flammable things that are surrounding you? Of course, you know that if you're in a wood shop, you have wood. But we also have sawdust, and sawdust on the ground isn't real flammable, but when you throw it up in the air or the dust collector mixes it with air, it becomes very flammable. We know that, in the auto shop we have gasolines, we have oils. Both shops have paints. Both shops have wiring, which if overloaded, it can be very flammable. And so it is very good for you to always be aware of your surroundings, to be aware of what is flammable when you're working, especially if you're creating a lot of sparks or if you're using any kind of heat source, to be aware of what is flammable around you. But I'd like you to make sure you're filling this sheet in as you go through. You'll see the next little category we talk about fire extinguishers a little bit, and the PASS acronym involved in operating one. But we know that all of our shops have ABC type fire extinguishers. And what that means is type A is a wood, paper, textiles, cotton clothing. That's a type A fire. Water will put out a type A fire. Depending on the heat of it, it might take more water, but water will take care of that. A type B fire is going to be your gases, your oils, your paints, your greases. Water doesn't put that out. And so we can't just use water in that situation. And a type C fire is electrical fire. And honestly, electrical fire is the #1 reason for a shop fire. And so our extinguishers are ABC. They will suppress all three types of fire, so you don't have to think about which extinguisher to pull off the wall. You just have one of them. We need to realize that in the case of a fire, the flames is the fire escaping from what's burning. And so we need to use the extinguisher at the base of the fire and not where the fire is actually happening. Electricity is your next shop hazard. And electricity is that #1 cause of shop fires. Electricity is an item that is often overloaded and in older buildings hasn't been kept up to date, so to speak. You'll see some shady workmanship on some of those because it's easier just to sometimes do the work instead of hiring the correct person or to follow the code, or maybe people don't know what the code is, and so they don't they don't keep it up, or they move a machine into a location that the wiring really isn't suitable for that machine. Look around your shop right now, and what are the things that are driven by electricity? And if you're in the CAD lab, that's different things than if you're in the wood shop or the auto shop. But what are the things that, or if you're at home, what are the things that are driven by electricity? And then the next question is, what are some of the items that actually you hold in your hand that are driven by electricity? We're going to pause for a moment. I'd like you to fill out those two sections. But think about that. What is driven by electricity, and then what are the things that you put in your hands that are driven by electricity, and try to differentiate those two. This next section, we're going to talk about some key advice around electricity, and I would love to say that this is all common sense, but I know that what's common to me and what's common to you guys, it's not common. This is not something that maybe some of you guys have grown up with, or you guys have been preached different things throughout your life. The first one is never use a frayed cord. Electrical cords by nature are very flexible, and they're a woven wire, and once we start seeing fraying, even if it's on the outside insulation, we know that wire's been bent enough times that it's worth replacing. You won't find frays on really heavy-duty electrical cords, but most of us won't have experience with heavy-duty electrical cords, and but we need to make sure that those frays don't occur. And someone might say, well, just put some electrical tape around it. If it's a nick on the outside insulation, that's completely different. A fray is where you're seeing wires exposed. And if wires are exposed, that means electricity can escape, and it can escape into your body, it can escape into the ground. I've heard of people getting electrical charges through their feet where electricity gets into the ground. It's a dangerous thing. You don't really see it coming, so avoid those frayed cords. And as we go through this, fill out the whys. It's real important that you're filling out these whys. Always wrap up electrical cords. Electrical cords are like sticks and vines in the woods, and they'll trip you. They will find a way to trip you. We want to make sure that we're wrapping up electrical cords. We're using them only when we need to, and then as soon as we're done with it, we're wrapping them up, storing them properly, hanging them where they belong. Without a doubt, they're a great asset to a shop, but we don't want that to become a tripping hazard. So the question once again is, why do we wrap up electrical cords? Next part is, always shut off power switches or unplug machinery before making repairs. Why? Well, we don't want to find ourselves in a situation where you didn't unplug a machine and someone comes up to the machine and decides to turn it on when it's halfway in repair. It can cause a lot of damage to that person, and damage to a person equals injury. We also don't want a half-repaired machine to fire up, because then it can cause even more repair work involved. We've had several situations where adjustments were being made on a machine, and a student would, turn the machine on, whether they didn't understand the consequences or they didn't care, and injuries were really close to happening. And so it's a good idea that our table saws have 3 shutoffs on them. They have the computer shut off, they have a main lockout shut off, and then we can shut the power off to the entire shop. I've been known when changing bandsaw blades to put the plug actually in my own pocket. We need to protect ourselves in any way, shape, or form, especially from a machine firing up. Number 4 there is that we understand that there is different electricities in each shop. We have normal 110 residential type wiring. We have 220 power, which is basically 2 110s coming into the same outlet. So you have double the power there. And then we have some 3-phase 440 items for some of our larger machinery, whether it's in the auto shop or the wood shop. Each one of these have a different pattern prong. We cannot adapt these prongs to fit our needs. Those prongs are specifically designed for the electricity that flows out the outlet. We need to be aware of that. We need to be aware that you know, it's built for our safety. It's built for the safety of the machine, and so we need to just understand them and use those visual cues to help us operate the machine correctly. Continuing on, let's talk about hazardous materials. I would like you to write down right now some of the hazardous materials that you see in your shop or that you know is in the shop that you are in, whether you're in the wood shop class for construction or woods or set design, or if you are in the auto shop for power mechanics or auto mechanics. Hazardous materials may be anything that you could breathe in, anything that you could consume, or anything that could get embedded in your skin or your eyes, those type of things. We're concerned about any foreign object getting inside your body, and so please write down the hazardous materials that are in your shop. Once you get that done, turn the page, and the next question is, how do they get into your body? You know, do they get into your body through your eyes, through your airways, through physical contact? You know, and a hazardous material can even be noise, but you know, we're more thinking about ventilation issues and you know, handling materials correctly. Next, you'll see a little image of a cabinet, and that cabinet signifies proper storage. We want to store our chemicals that are flammable and our chemicals that produce a lot of fumes. We want to store those inside of a fire-safe cabinet. And why? Because you know, we have to use them, but we want to make sure that the fumes are contained. Fumes are usually harmful to our body. The fumes are also they're quite flammable, and we can't just leave those out for anybody to stumble across. So we need to make sure we're storing those properly. Every manufacturer creates a thing called MSDS sheets, so Material Safety Data Sheets. And these sheets will tell us if this product gets into your body through whatever method, what is the medical things you need to do. And some of them might be as small as flush eyes and that's it, or it may say flush eyes and call for medical assistance. Or if you swallow something, what should your first step be before you call medical attention? And some things, if you get in your body, you need to call 911 right away. Where are they located? They're on the bookshelves in the shop. And they're also usually labeled on the back of the containers. And you're also able to access this information via internet or Wikipedia or Google, or you can access that stuff pretty quickly with today's data streaming abilities. So let's take a minute to discuss compressed air. The questions posed here are, what would compressed air be used for in a shop? Compressed air could be used for lots of different things in the shop, but appropriately, compressed air should only be used for inflation, tires or balls, or anything that may need compressed air inside of it. Compressed air can also be used for air-driven equipment, tools, whether it's a brad nailer or a framing nailer, or we have some machinery in the auto shop and handheld tools that could also use compressed air. We will use compressed air for cleaning of a few items, such as filters on the dust collection system. How could it be harmful? How could compressed air be harmful to the person? If compressed air hits your open spots on your body, your eyes, your mouth, any open sores, that air is compressed at about 165 pounds, which means it will open up a wound. It will make its way into your eyeball. I've heard of stories where eyes have actually been displaced a little bit. That's a lot of air coming into a small area very quickly. And I've heard stories of people being inflated. So we need to be respectful around compressed air, and we need to just be respectful. This next portion, I'm not sure how this will come up on the screen, but I'm going to ask that you take a couple minutes and fill out what proper personal protective equipment would look like for you in your shop. So pause the video now and take some time to fill out this little gingerbread man dressed appropriately for the shop. Welcome back. Let's talk about some additional safety equipment we have in each shop. Ventilation is a major concern because we as humans, we not only like to breathe, but we need to breathe. And so the question at hand is, what are we protecting ourselves from? In a natural environment, we don't have to protect ourselves from anything. However, we're in a confined environment, and we're in an environment where the human body wasn't made to be exposed to certain things. The human body wasn't made to be exposed to gasoline or exhaust, or even fumes from polyurethane, or even fine sawdust. We weren't. So let's pick apart a few of these. We're protecting ourselves away from chemicals and chemical fumes in particular. So your exhaust fumes, your fumes from gasolines and oils, from paints, and from wood finishes. So we're protecting ourselves from chemical fumes. We're protecting ourselves from dust and debris and small particles. Dust by nature is in the environment, but we start getting into possibly fine metal particles from sawing, or fine sawdust from sanding. Our bodies aren't made for those, they're not equipped for those. So we need to protect ourselves from those things. How? What ventilation is in each shop? Each shop has air handlers, which you will hear run almost continuously. The woodworking shop has a large dust collection system, and it has a smaller air filtration system. The auto shop has a large exhaust fan that runs when we're working in the shop, and it also has a exhaust pump, if you will, that we can hook up to vehicle exhaust systems. How? What other ventilation equipment can be worn? We can wear respirators. A respirator will fit over your mouth and your nose. And the respirators that we have available are more for dust concerns. They're not necessarily chemical respirators. Our exposure to to any chemical fumes is very limited in here because we don't do a lot of that kind of work. However, we need to make sure that exhaust fumes are evacuated and dust is evacuated, and then any small particulates we can take care of with a respirator. Hearing protection. What are we protecting ourselves from? Well, noise. We're protecting ourselves from noise. And the woodworking shop is probably the most exposure to just got machinery. Machinery will produce high decibel noise. It will produce high frequency noise, which is usually a higher pitch, which affects you a little bit differently. And some of those machines aren't running for a couple minutes, but they may be running for the duration of a class period. Without a doubt, as you age, your response and your recovery from loud noises goes down. So, especially at your adolescent age, teenager, we want to make sure that we're aware of it. And once you're aware, now you can start protecting your own ears, so that you can hear when you get old, right? How? There's a few methods. There's one method where we actually put earplugs in. I don't supply the earplugs because earplugs are not something that we want to share. Because once they actually go in your ears, they're pretty much yours. You don't want to share those earplugs anymore. And they end up getting pretty costly because they don't get respected. They become very disposable in nature. But without a doubt, a great way to muffle the sounds. Other ways is we have a large supply of ear muffs, and those are basically the earphone protectors that will go all the way around the ear. And usually they have a small foam padding, a plastic shell, sometimes there's some foam inside of them, and they're going to shield the sound from actually getting to the earlobe. And those are supplied, and those are very helpful, especially when we're possibly running the wood planer or saws for an extended period of time. That duration which you're exposed, that's where the damage is really going to happen. So we want to protect ourselves from this. Hand protection. What are we protecting ourselves from? Think about it. We're protecting ourselves mostly from sharp items. Some sharp items are stationary. They may be a utility knife. They may be just a sharpened edge from a cut piece of metal, or even a cut piece of wood can produce a pretty sharp edge. So we need to protect ourselves. We need to be aware that sharp edges and then sliding your hand on them will penetrate the skin. We have spinning blades and rotating blades and oscillating blades that are extremely sharp. And so we need to keep the correct blade to fingertip distances for that protection. What else are we protecting ourselves from? Heat. Our saw blades in nature become very hot. Since wood is an insulator, metal is a conductor, it will conduct all the heat from cutting and from friction. So we want to make sure that we take we just respect that blade's going to be really hot. And so we want to make sure we protect ourselves from burns. Also in construction class, you do a little bit of sweat welding on copper pipe. It will also be hot. Auto shop, we do some torch work from time to time. Hot. Respect that. What else are we protecting ourselves from? Chemicals. Whether it's a polyurethane or it's a degreaser of some sort. these are abrasive to the skin, and so whenever possible, if we can put on some either latex gloves or some kind of more surgical type glove that will protect us, that's ideal. And those are usually supplied in the shop, and so it's ideal to kind of give yourself a little boundary layer from those chemicals. When? Well, when you're exposed. There's no sense in wearing a pair of surgical gloves walking up and down the hallway. That's not necessary. When we're working on machines, it's not necessary. When you're exposed to chemicals, putting polyurethanes on, absolutely. So you're going to have to use some judgment here. I will try to give you, I'll try to help you along with that. And as you're beginning in any shop, you're going to need some assistance to understand that, hey, that's going to be hot, or you're going to want to protect your hands. But the goal is that you can start taking care of that. Safe workshop should be organized by what means? My definition of organized is it makes sense to all. And that's a struggle for a lot of us. That's a struggle for myself. For many people, organized is a struggle. Organized means labeled. Organized means, sometimes it means straight lines. Sometimes it means providing a rack system. But a lot of it is putting it back in a consistent spot and putting it back in a labeled spot. Safe workshop also is organized by having clear walkways. We always have good exits to the doorways. We have clear paths. There will be sawdust and there will be scraps next to saws, and it needs to be cleaned up before you can work on it. We can't work around clutter. We need to make sure we're cleaning it up in a timely manner. It doesn't make sense to sweep up after every single cut, but sometimes you might have to sweep up halfway through the class period, and that's organized. Organized is clean. First aid. When should we seek first aid attention? When you have an injury of any kind needs attention. Too many times in our life we pretend like it's not a big deal, and sometimes it ends up not being a big deal. But I think that cautious behavior is way better than tough person mentality. If you have a burn, if you have a cut, a scrape, even minor, the first thing is we want to make sure it's clean, and then we want to kind of assess what the damage is. It might just be a scrape, and it might be a pretty good cut. Me and Mr. Harder don't know until you let us know. We're not going around doing hand inspections. Let us know. This is not a you're in trouble situation. This is we care and we want you to be taken care of situation. So when should you seek attention? Anytime. So this pretty much concludes the general safety packet. You may go back through and watch any section of this. If you look in the comments, you will see a timeline, so you can kind of advance and move about the video as you see fit. I hope it's helpful. If you have any questions, ask me or Mr. Harder, and we can help you out with that.